So I guess there's a big hype around the recent announcement of the iPad by Apple, and which of course is not something that's surprising to us, given that touch technologies have been around for quite a while. But it is generating hype because it allows what sort of larger displays would not have allowed us to do, for instance, very easily in the last few years. What is particularly interesting about touch is that it's in our case we look at it as sort of a means towards an end. It's not really the the end itself, so to say. Like the touch is probably one piece of the entire puzzle. And why we say that is because it brings us closer to how we interact with physical and tangible objects in our space and in the environment in a natural way, of course. So, of course, having to touch something or pick something up from a display would be, of course, a lot more natural than having to drag your mouse cursor around or even pick up a sort of a digitizer pen and sort of click at objects in the space. So in our lab, we're working on sort of extending the touch technologies, but in ways that can integrate both, the virtual environment and the physical environment. So, for instance, a scenario would be where you have your typical desktop and you can basically now touch the display there, or you can pick objects from the display. You'd reach into it, grab the object, and then sort of drop it onto your desk, which itself would also be another sort of tabletop display. And the purpose for that would be that, with a larger display, you can look at contents quicker, you can interact with a lot more objects at the same time, or you can also work with teams of people at the same time. So you would go through folders that are on your desktop. If you find the item that's interesting, say a music file that you want to have someone on the other line on the phone, for instance, listen, or on your cell phone, you could pick up the music file, drop it on your cell phone, and basically plays itself. Or you could, for instance, look at a folder, you figure out that it's something that you don't want to use anymore, you pick it up and you drop it in the trash can. Now, 5 minutes later, maybe a student comes in and they want to look at their grades they got in their final exam. So you open up the final exams, you may highlight it, you may sort of discuss it with the student, and you could basically pick it up, the document, and again, drop it in on that display, on that technology. Now, that is something we are looking at in sort of 4 to 5 years down the road. That probably be very possible with sensors integrated in our environment. But in the meantime, we are sort of making smaller steps, and one of our recent inventions is what we call the lens mouse or display mouse. And with the lens mouse, what you have basically is a mouse casing, which allows you to control the cursor using the typical optical sensors on the display, but with the addition of a touch display on the mouse itself. And as a result of this, what you can do is basically interact with objects that you normally do using the cursor, but also then sort of work with a more natural means of interacting with other elements. Like, for instance, if you're in a drawing package, you could sort of paint or draw more naturally with your fingers. Or if you have to sort of pick up different icons or move objects very rapidly between different parts of a large display, you could also do that with your sort of your touch display. So the lens mouse is one of our recent technologies. We're also working on very similar other things in the lab with tabletop displays, where we are looking at multi-touch for interacting with 3D objects. So you can imagine a group of surgeons looking at a 3D CAT scan of say some body part or whatever it may be, and having them to interact with the 3D body part with their fingers or hands, basically on the touch surface, on the multi-touch surface.